This book was the start of everything. Sarah J Maas seems to do that to me. This book changed so much for me. I never would have thought I would be so comfortable talking about that. Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is the channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on and talk about some books. I was struggling for some inspiration for videos I want to film, and I just did a scroll through some other videos that YouTubers have put out recently, and I saw Cassidy from Covers with Cass do a list of books that made her fall in love with reading. That just seemed like the perfect idea to get me out of the little bit of a reading slump funk that I'm in at the moment, to go back and reminisce and chat through some of the books that really changed my reading, really changed my thoughts about reading, and actually got me into reading again way back at like end of 2019. So the first book that I'm going to show you is of course the one that I had to start with, because it was the book that got me back into reading and got me inspired to make YouTube videos way back when I first started. Those videos unfortunately aren't available anymore because I've deleted them because I'm very embarrassed by them, but this book was the start of everything and I am so grateful to it, and that is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. There's two in the series at the moment, House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath. I have to actually show up the spine of this book because the front cover of it isn't actually on there. I broke this within a couple of weeks of getting this book because I read it and then reread it and then just tore apart the thing with my very enthusiastic reading. But House of Earth and Blood, I should say. This book follows a character by the name of Bryce Quinlan, who is half fae, half human, and she's a bit of a party girl, has fun with her friends, until one day she walks into her apartment and all of her friends and her friends' pack have been brutally murdered by an unknown creature. This sends Bryce into a bit of a spiral, and then 2 years later the mysterious murders start up again, and she's recruited by the Angels, who are sort of in charge of Crescent City, to investigate the murder with the help of a sort of bodyguard by the name of Hun Athalar. They have to find out what happened in the past, what's happening in the current, who's to blame for it, with all of these political systems fighting against them and this broader underlying underbelly of society that they didn't even know existed. There is so much character development in this book for Bryce in particular, but also for some of these side characters like Hunt and like some of her friends. And this story, it just thrust me so heavily into the fantasy romance genre, and I loved every minute of the time that I spent on this book. It was just an incredible read and I sped through it so quickly. It was definitely a slow burn, but it had me turning pages like you would not believe. The lighted up scene with Danica and the friendship and the found family and just everything. I cannot say how much I love this book in words. I did a reread for it fairly recently when the second book, House of Sky and Breath, came out, which I loved equally, and the ending of that book again threw me for an absolute loop. Sarah J Maas seems to do that to me. I would recommend this book to anyone who is struggling and wants to get back into reading or anything like that. Just pick up this book, it is so much fun. The second book on this list is Loveless by Alice Oseman, and this book meant a lot to me for a completely different reason. This was one of the first novel style books that I read from Alice Oseman. I'd already read the Heartstopper series, and so I wasn't sure really going into this book what to expect, but it follows Georgia, who is a girl who is fanfic obsessed, and she has this dream of what love is supposed to look like in her head, but in reality she can't seem to find anything that fits that image. Naturally she thinks something is wrong with her, and you know, maybe she's destined to be without love for the rest of her life. As she starts university, she learns all sorts of new terms like asexual and aromantic, and it really thrusts her into discovering her sexual identity and coming to terms and being okay with who she is, forming some beautiful friendships, and coming to terms with who everyone is sort of growing and becoming throughout this story, her and her friends and the new friends that she's making, and how she's supposed to feel versus how she actually feels. It's just an intense, amazing, incredible read. All of the things that Lady Gaga said in that video that one time that everybody makes a gif out of, it was so much fun for me. And the reason why it is one of the books that made me fall in love with reading is because of how it was written. You felt like you were inside of Georgia's mind all the time. It was kind of written like a diary entry. This book also actually gave me the confidence to sort of publicly come out as who I am. I am bisexual, and I never would have thought I would be so comfortable talking about that until I read this book, and I was like, you know what? The acceptance that this character was able to experience towards the end of the book, when everybody just accepted her for who she is and she just was so unashamed to say who she is and just be who she is. By the end of this book I was like, you know what, I want that, and it inspired me to try and get that for myself. I really love it, and I would recommend it to anyone who is either struggling and needs a bit of inspiration, a bit of help, and a bit of hope, or if you just are interested in reading a conversational story that's really written in a beautiful writing style that keeps you coming back for more, I would recommend this book. The next book follows a completely different train, and this was because it kind of harked back to my own childhood when I grew up sort of with my dad and my brother watching Top Gear. So Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James, the name is escaping me, but I know the third guy's name is James. And I remember watching Top Gear with my dad and my brother and just laughing at their witty banter and how they talk about cars. And I knew nothing about cars, but I loved that, you know, that experience with my dad and my brother. This book was sort of a harking back to that, and that is Diddley Squat by Jeremy Clarkson. This is also a TV show on Amazon Prime that's, I think, based off of this, which I watched with Ben, which again, super, super fun. And it basically follows Jeremy Clarkson trying to do farming, for lack of a better word. It chronicles all of his struggles as he's trying to understand the regulatory environment around farming and just how difficult it is, all the machinery, all of the crop rotations and the science, and also the sort of broader environmental conversations around conservation and wilding. Jeremy Clarkson really comments on all of that in this book in a really, really funny, satirical, humorous way. Anyway, that's a really shit explanation. Really, really loved this book. It was really, really funny. I smashed through it so fast. Would recommend it to people who are potentially interested in farming or who loved Jeremy Clarkson and watched Top Gear growing up. The next book is kind of an obvious one because it is the first graphic novel I ever read, and it made me fall in love with that format, and that is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. You'll notice there are 2 Alice Oseman books on this list, and that's just because these books are so incredible. I have probably read this book maybe 4 or 5 times since. I bring it out at every readathon because it is super, super easy to just pick this up and read it in like 45 minutes, and then that's one book checked off my list. Heartstopper as a series follows Nick and Charlie. These are 2 guys in high school. Charlie is openly gay, but only because he was forced out of the closet, I think the year prior to the events of this series. And he's dealing with a lot of the mental health and trauma that comes with being forced out of the closet and the bullying and the anxiety. Whereas Nick has always sort of seen himself one way. He's seen himself as just a straight guy, rugby lad, interested in girls, until he sort of strikes up this friendship with Charlie, and he begins to have feelings that he doesn't necessarily understand, and he comes to terms with his own sexual identity as a result. And it's just a beautiful high school romance, lots of different representation throughout the story. There is obviously LGBT representation, there is mental health representation, there are people of color throughout the story. It's just the experience of so many different people through the high school lens, and it's just a fascinating read. And then lastly, we have a very recent read for me, which is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Now, this book changed so much for me. I am usually not a character-driven person when I read. I am plot-driven, very much so. I like things to be fast-paced, moving, and really, you know, high stakes, tense, everything like that. I like for a book to push me through constantly. I like a speedy read, and this definitely is not that. This is a character-led book. This follows those 2 characters and develops them in such intricate detail and with such care that I didn't expect to love it, but ended up absolutely falling in love. It follows Addie LaRue, who made a deal, I think 300 years in the past, with the devil, basically, to get away from a marriage that she didn't want. And the sort of consequence of this deal is that while she will get to live forever, everyone who ever meets her will forget her as soon as she's out of eyesight. Until one day she meets a guy named Henry who remembers her the next day. And so it sets off this exploration of why he remembers her, what makes him so different, as well as how to leave your mark on the world, or how a person can leave their mark on the world without even realizing it. And for Addie LaRue, that is through artwork, that is through inspiring people to create music and paintings and pictures and everything inspired by her. This book was another 5-star read for me. I think it was my best book of the first half of 2022 as well, so definitely go and give this a read if you haven't already. If you are not a character-driven person, then maybe this is not the book for you, but maybe it will surprise you just like it surprised me. So these are the 5 books that made me fall in love with reading. I would recommend them to literally anyone. I think they are so good, and some of them are so important. Some of them are just, you know, childhood memories for me, like Diddley Squat, but some of them, like Heartstopper and Loveless, I think are so important for people to go and read and experience. So yeah, this is my 5 books that made me fall in love with reading. Let me know down below what some of the books are that made you fall in love with reading, what some of your favorite books are, the things that just stand stand out to you as potentially changing your perspective of reading, opening up a new genre for you, or even something that, like Love Was For Me, helped you through something that you were potentially insecure about or found difficulty with, and it really pushed you to just love yourself. I love to chat to you guys in the comments down below, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really hope that you liked this video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It is a super easy way to help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!